now for our final session, Deborah will be speaking with JoAnn Martin, VP Retail Industry Strategy at Blue Yonder. JoAnn and Deborah will discuss the findings of our proprietary survey. So welcome, JoAnn, and Deborah, back to you.
Great, thanks so much. So it's been a whirlwind of a day from PVH to Orvis to Tractor Supply to New Balance. And I think JoAnn and I just want to take the opportunity to summarize that and also talk a little bit about the survey that we did together. So JoAnn, any kind of key takeaways from the day so far?
Yeah, I've had some great takeaways as I've kind of gone through, listening to Sarah as she was talking about the synchronization and the lack of synchronization between supply and demand and a lot of the complexity within the supply chain. PVH has such a diverse offering of products, and what they're combating has been really insightful and trying to figure out how they're managing through the disruption. Listening to Colin talk a little bit about kind of the supply chain resilience and the importance of that, and really kind of how they managed and was really intrigued about how they managed the diversification of their sourcing strategy and how it became a competitive advantage, quite honestly, for them, what it seems throughout this year, and really helped them to navigate. So definitely interesting. And then listening to Joe saying they're coming out a new company out of last year and how they've really been adaptive. And I think that really speaks to the resiliency of both the retail industry as a whole, as well as the response that most of the retailers have seeked out through their supply chains as well.
No, that's great. All right, should we look at what our survey said?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, I think that if we kind of talk a little bit about the data here, we looked at kind of some of the challenges that we've seen in the past 12 months and what we think will have an impact going forward. So looking at this kind of expected increase in demand for domestically made product, and I love Steve Lamar's term, like the nearshoring, which I think is just a great way to think about it, and we'll definitely borrow that going forward. But what we're seeing in terms of the ranking of these factors driving the nearshoring strategies, what here surprised you, JoAnn?
I'm not sure that I was necessarily surprised. I think one of the things that is most important and most of the businesses are looking to achieve is efficient operations and being able to manage those. So having better quality control and better inventory management is important. And when you look at the shift to online, shorter lead times is really important to get that product closer to the customer. So I actually find this to be in alignment with what we've seen as a move to digital, and seen a lot of synergies with what we've kind of seen throughout the channel shift throughout last year. What about you?
I mean, I think that we've always talked to companies about this idea around just in time, if there's a way to, have less inventory on hand. And so more around kind of, I would say, almost the P&L and thinking about, kind of driving a greater gross margin out of the goods that they're selling. I think what we're seeing here, right, is more almost, holistic, this idea around kind of quality control and, some of the other challenges here. And I think what we heard from, kind of President Biden yesterday, I mean, I think this will continue to change, in the near and long future.
I think so too. Do you want to go ahead and take a look at the next one?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
All right. So, this is something where we can all just, kind of ask ourselves, but what has changed in terms of how all of us behave and, kind of what consumers prefer? I think that, I've always, kind of been about the experiential store and how can, whether it's this idea of, engaging a new consumer or re-engaging an existing one, and certainly, kind of having sales occur that maybe were unexpected. But I did think that, kind of this idea around preferences around buying kind of in-store and online were a bit surprising. It certainly exceeded what I would have thought.
That absolutely shocked me when I saw that and saw, I knew the physical store wasn't going away, and we all know that, and it'll continue to be a piece of the pie. I wonder though, when I look at this, and if I were to interpret it a little bit, is this more driven by omni fulfillment and buy online, pick up in store and leveraging the store for that immediacy? with a lack of final mile being fully mature within the industry, or what do you think about that as you look at it?
I mean, it was interesting. I think we heard from all of our speakers today around, the role that the store plays, and, whether it's around fit, like Joe talked about, or, how, Dave talked about, almost this education aspect. And I think we heard a bit about that from Colin. And then, with Sarah, right, this idea around inspiration from the store. I think that there's something, and while I know touch is, critical in the process, many of us haven't been able to do that in the past year, but I think that did. So I asked Joe the question. I mean, I think that did drive higher returns, which ultimately is not particularly sustainable.
True. I mean, when I look at, though, kind of the phone purchasing and some of those components, that was a little bit of a surprise to me from a commerce standpoint. And I know retailers have been aggressively pursuing changing the digital experience online for their consumers and starting to shift some of that experience. And I think maybe it's about timing to a certain extent. I know having real-time visibility to inventory and really adapting your online presence and being able to give customers more information prior to purchase about where to pick up from or immediacy has become one of the biggest areas of focus. And so I think as that continues to grow and the demand channel continues to expand, we'll see that number shift a little bit throughout the year.
What's something we should do, JoAnn, is, because we asked about, share of clothing or footwear purchases made on the phone, we should go back and find out about kind of more the, basics, or, let's call it the essential products, because I do think that, if you're buying a tube of toothpaste, right, that's different than buying a shirt or a pair of shoes. So it would be interesting to kind of compare and contrast, and maybe our next survey. So let's go look at the next slide. So, this is certainly, I mean, I think we heard this today, the changing strategies around manufacturing and sourcing, and some of it, I think what's right, there's a few buckets, right? There were those organizations that had wanted to change. It just needed kind of a greater reason to. There were those who were like, our supply chain is in great shape. We don't need. And then there were those who were already in the process of kind of reevaluating everything, and it was kind of up for grabs. So how do you, kind of look at some of these kind of, I think the almost 67% around expanding local and domestic sources, certainly was a big number in terms of, I was surprised by the results.
Look, I think when you go back to kind of the conversation that Sarah had earlier about the disjointed supply and demand and wanting to be able to mitigate some of the disruptions to your supply chain, this is really in alignment with that. I think retailers really suffered from having that lack of synchronization last year. And so it's important to kind of bring that closer to the customer. But we've been seeing a shift for a long time with customers wanting product at a much more rapid rate, and that speed to market, along with the fact of the exploding cost to serve, right? And so this makes absolute sense in trying to reduce cost to serve, increase your service levels to your customers, and bring it closer to the customers. So there's a lot of things that this dovetails into from sustainability. When I think about it, you're going to mitigate risk. And you were talking a little bit about reducing order size to a certain extent and trying to do smaller lot quantities versus bulk. Having this flexibility and closer production allows you to contract that lead time. So I definitely wasn't necessarily, I was pleasantly surprised to see at how far we've moved the needle within a year, and a little surprised to see how high it was at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, right, another topic of conversation that continues to evolve already in 21 is around this idea of C2M, right? Kind of customer to manufacturer. So whether it's, kind of personalization, customization, but if you're really making just in time, and if, right, you get the order today, you can make it tonight and deliver it to the customer tomorrow, right? Whether it's, kind of micro fulfillment or these micro factories that we're seeing pop up everywhere. It really, I think it goes back to bringing this idea, like I always talk about, like shopping as a sport, because not only am I designing something that's made for me, I mean, it's truly made for me. And then there's the excitement around kind of, wow, right? You can see it being made, and then you're getting it in a period of time that is, kind of incredibly short, and you're not thinking about, oh well, I still haven't received that product, maybe I should go and order from somewhere else. You're engaged as a consumer. So I think we're very early days in this, but I do think it's going to change, longer term, how retailers and manufacturers go to market.
I would agree. And I think it dovetails into our next one.
Yeah, well, this has been really very significant. And like I said, I was surprised and truly around the kind of AFA Executive Summit last March, because almost every session there was an element of sustainability in terms of how retailers and brands and manufacturers, were thinking about sustainability, about how they measure themselves, how they hold themselves accountable. And, but there was also this element around cost. I think that what we've done is we've seen that there is this association now with profitability, right? Because if we can make less, it gets utilized in the time frame we expect. It's not sold on, kind of a markdown. There's so much that's happened. I don't, how do you look at kind of the survey results, and how does that change, how you think about the future, JoAnn?
Yeah, I definitely think the one thing that is most definite is sustainability only gained traction last year. I don't think it mitigated any of that. And I was a little surprised by that, I think, in the beginning of the importance that it raised, but it does make sense when you think about waste mitigation and the profitability, as you were saying, in that transition of profitability. Focusing on sustainability allows you to magnify your profits to a certain extent. If you can mitigate by understanding the demand of your customers or being able to pinpoint where they're going to demand their product, you can contract that waste component. And that right there is going to drive profit to your bottom line. So I think this corresponds well with what we're seeing from that standpoint, and shows that traction. And customers are really gravitating towards it. It's a message that's resonating with them, and it's the converging of kind of the environmental focus and trying to keep that, as well as the profitability from a retail standpoint. And I think it's a common ground for both retailers and for customers in when they're engaging with certain retailers.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think that, kind of pre-pandemic, we saw this, consumers willing to pay 5% more, right? If something has a hang tag or is, kind of identified as being made, in a sustainable manner. We've seen those percentages in terms of what the consumer is willing to pay continue to increase through last year and into this year. And so I think there's also, it's not necessarily all on the retailer, manufacturer, brand to kind of, handle if there is a higher cost, the consumer is willing to share that. And to me, that's been a very interesting and I'd say uplifting message that's, kind of come out of the past year.
I think so as well. Why don't we take a look at the divergence that we saw between the two groups?
Well, this is, quite interesting. I mean, what we think customers want and then what they actually want are, oftentimes, quite different. And, certainly free shipping, we heard it was like table stakes for holiday 20, and, lowest price. Absolutely. What do you think about the rest of these?
I found it fascinating that the retailers felt that products in the US was kind of number one, and the consumers saw it as number 4. Free shipping, to your point, surprised me as the number 1, because I do view that as somewhat of a table stakes right now. And I do think that many retailers have changed over the years, and this is a core to a lot of their loyalty programs and a lot of how they do business. Lowest price was surprising to me because I often hear the terminology value, and value is different per customer. It could be fabrication. It could be, how they view value is often different. So price was a little surprising, even though I understand the compression on discretionary spend during this time.
Well, and it can also be as they're price comparing, right, in terms of where they're actually buying. I mean, I think that with the free shipping, many retailers have a hurdle in terms of basket size. And, in some cases, I mean, I had heard things last year, I didn't, where, retailers were saying, we're seeing consumers put extra items in the basket to hit that threshold, and then they're kind of returning. And so they've been going through this whole process of really rethinking, kind of what that looks like. So I think that we're at time. So JoAnn, thank you. This was great. Always so much to learn here. And Max, back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Deborah. And thank you, JoAnn.